Everyone, can I have your attention, please? My daughter-in-law Jennifer snatched the champagne glass from my hand mid-sip. 40 faces turned toward us at my son's birthday party. She only came for the free food and drinks. Jennifer's voice rang through the silent restaurant. She's basically charity at this point. We've been supporting her out of the goodness of our hearts. My son David stood right beside her, arms crossed, nodding in agreement. The humiliation burned through me, but not because her words were true, because of what she didn't know. That house with the chef's kitchen she loved to show off, I paid for it. The BMW with the vanity plates? Mine. Everything they owned, I'd given them, legally, foolishly, completely. But instead of defending myself, I did something that confused everyone in that room. I smiled. I set down my purse, smoothed my dress, and walked out of that restaurant like I was leaving church on a Sunday morning. And the moment I got to my car, I made one phone call that lasted exactly 8 minutes. By the next morning, they woke up to find the house and car titles no longer in their names. My name is Beverly, and I'm 72 years old. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to know I'm not alone in this. If you're watching this right now, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Are you in Florida, California, Texas? I read every single comment, and it means the world to me to know there are people out there who understand what it's like when the people you love most turn into strangers. Now let me take you back to where this all began, because what happened at that birthday party didn't come out of nowhere. It was the culmination of choices I'd made with the best intentions and a betrayal that had been building for 3 long years. I was married to my husband Frank for 48 years before he passed away from cancer. Those last 2 years of his life were the hardest of mine, watching him deteriorate, trying to make him comfortable, holding his hand through treatments that we both knew weren't working. When he finally went, I was devastated, but also, if I'm being honest, relieved that he wasn't suffering anymore. Frank had been an engineer and a careful planner. He left me very well taken care of. Between his pension, his life insurance, our investments, and the sale of the engineering firm he'd built from scratch, I found myself at 69 years old with more money than I'd ever imagined having. We'd lived modestly, always saving, always planning for retirement. We'd had dreams, travel, hobbies, time with grandchildren. But Frank never got to see those dreams come true, and I found myself alone in a big house with more money than I needed and no one to share it with. David was our only child. We'd wanted more, but after a complicated pregnancy and delivery, the doctors advised against it. So David became everything to us. We poured all our love, all our hopes, all our resources into raising him. Frank was so proud when David got into law school. We paid for every penny of it, tuition, books, housing, everything. We didn't want him starting his career buried in debt. David graduated and started working at a prestigious firm in Denver. That's where he met Jennifer. She was a paralegal there, ambitious and confident. They dated for a year before getting engaged, and I'll admit I had reservations from the start. There was something about the way she looked at things, always calculating, always measuring. But David loved her, and I wanted my son to be happy. So I welcomed her into our family with open arms. They got married in a lavish wedding that Frank and I paid for, $28,000 for one day. Jennifer had insisted on the venue, the flowers, the designer dress. David had looked uncomfortable when we discussed the budget, but Jennifer had squeezed his hand and said, "It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, right? We want your parents to be proud." What were we supposed to say to that? After Frank died, I struggled with the loneliness. The house felt too big, too empty, too full of memories. David called regularly at first, checking in, making sure I was eating, making sure I wasn't spending all day in Frank's study crying. Jennifer would get on the phone sometimes, her voice honey sweet, asking if I needed anything. 6 months after Frank's funeral, David and Jennifer came to visit. We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Frank and I had shared thousands of meals. and David held my hand across the worn oak surface. "Mom," he said, "Jennifer and I have been talking. We're worried about you here all alone." I squeezed his hand back. "I'm managing, sweetheart. It's hard, but I'm managing." Jennifer leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Beverly, we care about you so much, and we've been thinking about your future. You have all this wealth now, and we want to make sure it's protected. We want to make sure you're protected." "Protected from what?" I asked. David glanced at Jennifer before continuing. "Mom, at your age, there are concerns about estate taxes, about what happens if you need long-term care, about nursing homes taking everything you and Dad worked so hard for. We've been talking to financial advisors, and they all say the same thing. The best way to protect your assets is to transfer them to family members now while you're healthy." I frowned. "I have a will. Everything goes to you, David. Your father and I made sure of that." "We know, Mom, but by then, there might not be much left. If you ever need to go into a facility, Medicaid won't cover it until you've spent down all your assets. Everything Dad left you could be gone. But if you transfer property to us now, there's a 5-year look-back period. After 5 years, those assets are protected. You'd still have access to everything. We'd never keep you from your own property. We'd just be holding it in trust, essentially, keeping it safe for the family." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "It's what all the wealthy families do, Beverly. It's smart planning. And it would give us such peace of mind knowing you're protected." They had papers drawn up already, professional documents prepared by lawyers at David's firm, transfer deeds for the house, both my home and the vacation cabin Frank and I had bought in Montana 20 years ago, transfer titles for the 2 cars in my garage, documents that would add David as a joint owner on my investment accounts, with right of survivorship. "You'll still have complete access to everything," David assured me. "This is just paperwork, Mom, just protection. You'll live in your house just like always, drive your car just like always. This doesn't change anything about your day-to-day life." I wanted to believe him. He was my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised to be honest and good. And the logic made sense to me. I'd heard stories about elderly people losing everything to nursing homes. I'd heard about estate taxes taking huge chunks of inheritances. I wanted to be smart. I wanted to protect what Frank had worked so hard to build. So I signed the papers, all of them. I transferred the house I'd lived in for 37 years into David's name. I transferred the Montana cabin. I made him joint owner on accounts containing nearly $900,000. I kept one checking account in just my name, the one where my pension and Social Security were deposited. "Just for your daily expenses," Jennifer had said, "so you don't have to bother David for every little thing." That checking account had about $4,000 in it at any given time. Everything else, all of it, was now legally David's. They celebrated with me that night, opening a bottle of expensive wine. "To family," Jennifer had toasted, her smile brilliant, "and to protecting what matters most." I should have known then. I should have seen something in that smile. The changes started small, so small I almost didn't notice at first. David stopped calling as frequently. When I'd call him, he'd sound rushed, distracted. "Can I call you back later, Mom? I'm in the middle of something." Later never seemed to come. Then they bought a new house. "We found the perfect place," Jennifer gushed over the phone. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, completely renovated kitchen. It's in the foothills with a view of the mountains. David's always wanted a home office with good natural light, and this place is perfect. "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for them. "When can I see it?" There was a pause. "Oh, we're so busy with the move right now, Beverly. Maybe in a few weeks, once we're settled." A few weeks turned into 2 months. I finally got invited over for a quick lunch. The house was stunning, exactly as Jennifer had described, maybe more so. As I walked through, admiring the hardwood floors and the granite countertops, something occurred to me. "This must have been expensive," I said carefully. I hope the mortgage isn't too much of a burden with David's student loans finally paid off. Jennifer's laugh was light, musical. Oh, Beverly, we paid cash. David had access to those investment funds you transferred, remember? We used part of that for the down payment and closing costs. It made much more sense than taking out a mortgage with interest rates being what they are. Don't worry. There's still plenty left. And this house is in the family now. It's an investment in your grandson's future. My grandson. They'd had Benjamin 2 years earlier, and I adored him. I'd held him in the hospital the day he was born, tears streaming down my face, wishing Frank could have met him. Jennifer was right. This house was for Benjamin's future. That's what family wealth was for, wasn't it? But the thing was, they'd never asked me. They'd just done it. I pushed down the uncomfortable feeling in my chest. They'd said I'd have access to everything. They'd said nothing would change. Maybe I was being old-fashioned, expecting them to consult me about decisions that were technically theirs to make now. Then David's car lease ended, and suddenly he was driving a brand-new BMW. Early inheritance, he joked when I commented on it. Might as well enjoy it now, right, Mom? I forced a smile. As long as you're happy, sweetheart. But I wasn't happy. I was starting to feel uneasy. The real turning point came when I mentioned I wanted to spend a month at the Montana cabin that summer. I'd been feeling cooped up, lonely. The cabin had always been my sanctuary, the place where Frank and I had escaped the world. I imagined myself there, reading on the porch, hiking the trails, healing. Actually, Mom, we rented it out, David said over the phone, his tone casual. We put it on one of those vacation rental sites. It's making great income, almost $3,000 a month during peak season. We figured since you weren't using it anyway, it might as well generate some revenue. My hands went numb. You rented out my cabin? It's not really yours anymore, Mom. Remember? You transferred it. But don't worry. The income goes into the investment account, so it's still in the family. We're being smart with your assets just like we promised. I felt something crack inside me then. Something I'd been trying to hold together. I wanted to use it this summer, I said quietly. Well, it's booked solid through September, maybe next year. Besides, Mom, you're not getting any younger. That cabin's pretty isolated. What if something happened to you up there? We'd never forgive ourselves. Maybe it's better if you stick closer to home. After that phone call, I sat in my kitchen for an hour, staring at nothing. This wasn't what we'd agreed to. This wasn't just paperwork and nothing changing. They were making decisions about property I'd owned for decades without even consulting me. They were spending money I'd saved for 50 years without asking if it was okay. But what could I do? Legally, it was all theirs now. I'd signed the papers. I'd given it all away. The invitations to family events became less frequent. When I did get invited, there was often a caveat. We're keeping it small, Mom. Or, it's really more of a work thing, probably boring for you. Or my favorite, we're trying to keep costs down this time. That last one stung the most because it was so transparently ridiculous. They were living in a house I'd essentially bought. They were driving cars I'd paid for. They were taking vacations to Europe funded by investments Frank had built. But somehow, including me at a family barbecue was a cost they needed to cut. I started to notice the way Jennifer looked at me when I did attend gatherings. Like I was a burden, an obligation, a charity case they'd taken on out of the goodness of their hearts. My friends noticed the change in me. Louise, who I'd known since David was in elementary school, asked me point blank over coffee one day, "Beverly, are you okay? You seem diminished somehow." I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to pour out the whole story. The transfers, the rental of my cabin, the way my own son had started treating me like an inconvenient relative instead of his mother. But shame kept my mouth shut. What kind of fool gives away their entire life's worth to their child and then complains about the consequences? "I'm fine," I lied, just adjusting to getting older. But I wasn't fine. I was disappearing. I could feel it happening, piece by piece. Then came David's 40th birthday party. Jennifer had insisted on a big celebration at an upscale restaurant downtown. David's 40 now, this is a milestone. We're inviting everyone important in his life. I got the invitation like everyone else, via email with a formal RSVP request. No phone call from David, no special mention that his mother would be there. Just a generic invitation that could have been sent to anyone. I almost didn't go, but he was my son. 40 years ago, I'd held him as a newborn, counted his tiny fingers, promised him I'd always be there for him. How could I not celebrate his birthday? I bought a new dress for the occasion, navy blue with a modest neckline, elegant without being flashy. I had my hair done at the salon. I even bought him a gift, a vintage pocket watch that had belonged to Frank's father, something with history and meaning. When I arrived at the restaurant, the party was already in full swing. The private dining room was packed with people, David's colleagues from the law firm, Jennifer's book club friends, neighbors, couples I didn't recognize. David was holding court at the center, laughing at someone's joke, a cocktail in his hand. He saw me and waved but didn't come over. No hug. No, "Thanks for coming, Mom." Just a wave, like I was an acquaintance who'd shown up. I found a seat at the edge of the room and ordered a glass of wine. Then another. I watched my son celebrate his life, surrounded by people who'd known him for 5 years, 10 years, maybe less. Where were the people who'd known him since he was a baby? Where were his childhood friends, our old neighbors, the families we'd grown close to? It was like his first 40 years had been erased, and this new life was all that mattered. This life that Jennifer had curated, that my money had funded. I was on my 3rd glass of champagne when Jennifer made her announcement. She'd snatched the glass from my hand, held it up, called for everyone's attention. She only came for the free food and drinks. She's basically charity at this point. The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at David, waiting for him to defend me, to stop his wife, to say this was wrong. He said nothing. He just stood there, nodding, agreeing with every word. That's when I understood. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or Jennifer having too much wine. This was planned. This was their truth, the story they'd been telling themselves and apparently others. I wasn't David's mother who'd sacrificed and saved to give him a better life. I wasn't the woman who'd paid for his education, his wedding, his house, his car. I was charity. I was a burden. I was someone they supported out of obligation, not love. The trembling in my hands wasn't from hurt anymore. It was from rage. Pure, cold, crystalline rage. But I didn't explode. I didn't scream or cry or defend myself. Because in that moment, standing in that restaurant with 40 pairs of eyes on me, I remembered something Jennifer didn't know. When I'd transferred those properties and accounts, I'd done it on David's firm's advice, his law firm. The papers had been prepared by his colleagues, and in my anxiety about doing the right thing, I'd consulted my own lawyer, Frances Michaels, who'd handled Frank's estate. Frances had been horrified when she saw the papers. "Beverly," she'd said, "this gives David full control, but it doesn't remove your legal rights entirely. You're listed as having life estate on the house, which means they can't force you out. And more importantly, these transfers are revocable if you can prove they were made under undue influence or false pretenses. If David ever fails to provide you access to the assets as promised, if he ever uses them contrary to what was agreed, you have grounds to reverse everything." "But I'm signing voluntarily," I'd protested. "You're signing based on specific representations, that you'll retain full access, that nothing will change in your day-to-day life, that this is merely protective paperwork. If those representations prove false, the transfers can be challenged and reversed. I'm documenting all of this in your file, including the explicit promises they made to you." Frances had also insisted on one other thing. She'd had me keep one investment account they didn't know about, a smaller account, only about $200,000 that wasn't mentioned in any of the transfer papers. "For emergencies," Frances had said. "Insurance in case things don't go as planned." I'd thought Frances was being paranoid. I'd thought my son would never betray me. But standing in that restaurant, being called Charity in front of a room full of strangers, I realized Francis had been right all along, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. I set down my purse on the chair, I smoothed my navy blue dress, I looked at David one more time, giving him a chance to say something, anything to take back what Jennifer had said. He looked away, so I walked out. Through the restaurant, past the bar where people were laughing and ordering drinks, out into the cool evening air. I walked to my car, the older Honda they hadn't bothered taking since they had their BMW and Jennifer's new Lexus. I got in, closed the door, and sat in the silence for a moment. Then I took out my phone and called Francis Michaels. It was 7:30 on a Friday evening, but Francis answered on the third ring. "Beverly? Is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "It's not okay, and I need to reverse the transfers, all of them. Tonight, if possible." "Tell me what happened." I told her everything. The rental of my cabin without permission, the purchase of their house using my money without consultation, the increasing exclusion from family events, and finally, the humiliation at David's birthday party. Francis was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then, "Do you have documentation of any of the promises they made? Texts? Emails?" "I have the emails David sent when he was convincing me to sign. He explicitly said I'd have full access to everything, that nothing would change, that I could use the properties whenever I wanted." "Perfect. That's exactly what we need. Beverly, I'm going to start drafting the reversal documents tonight. Based on what you've told me, we have clear grounds for invalidating the transfers based on misrepresentation and undue influence. But I need to be honest with you. This is going to destroy your relationship with David." I looked back at the restaurant, at the warm lights and the shadows of people celebrating inside. "I think that relationship is already gone," I said quietly. "All right. Give me the evening to work. I'll have everything ready by morning. We'll need to file with the county recorder's office immediately to reverse the property deeds, and I'll contact the investment firm first thing to freeze the accounts pending legal resolution. Once we start this process, Beverly, there's no going back. Are you absolutely certain?" I thought about 40 years of being David's mother. Late-night feedings and skinned knees and homework help, piano recitals and soccer games and graduation ceremonies, the pride I'd felt watching him succeed, the love I'd poured into raising him right. Then I thought about Jennifer snatching the champagne glass from my hand. "She's basically Charity." "I'm certain," I said. The call lasted exactly 8 minutes. When it was over, I drove home to my house, the house I'd lived in for 37 years, the house that was legally in David's name but would be mine again by Monday morning. I slept better that night than I had in 3 years. Saturday morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. By 7 a.m., I had 12 missed calls and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. "Mom, call me immediately." "Mom, what did you do?" "You need to call me right now. This is serious." At 7:30, Jennifer started calling. I ignored those too. Finally, at 8 a.m., David's number flashed on my screen again, and I answered. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted, not even bothering with a greeting. I took a sip of my coffee. "Good morning, David." "Don't good morning me. I just got a notification from the county recorder that the house deed is being contested, and the investment firm froze the accounts. They said there's a legal hold pending resolution of ownership dispute. Mom, you can't do this." "Actually, I can," I said calmly. "I consulted with an attorney, and it turns out that when you fraudulently induce someone to transfer property by making promises you have no intention of keeping, those transfers can be reversed." "Fraudulently?" "Mom, we didn't defraud you. You promised I'd have full access to my property. You promised nothing would change. You rented out my cabin without even asking me. You bought a house and cars with my money without my input. You excluded me from family events and then publicly humiliated me, calling me charity at your birthday party. That's not what we agreed to, David." Jennifer didn't mean it like that. She'd had too much wine. "You stood there and agreed with her." Silence on the other end. "You made your choice last night," I continued. "You chose to embarrass me in front of strangers. You chose to treat me like a burden instead of your mother, so I'm making my choice now. I'm taking back what's mine." "You can't do this," Jennifer's voice came through, shrill and panicked. She must have grabbed the phone. "Beverly, you're being ridiculous. That money is David's now. That house is ours. You signed papers." Papers that were predicated on false promises. My attorney has all the documentation we need. The emails where David explicitly promised I'd retain full access. The rental agreement you made for my cabin without my permission. It's called undue influence and misrepresentation, Jennifer. Look it up. "We'll fight this," she shouted. "We'll get our own lawyers." "With what money?" I asked pleasantly. "The accounts are frozen, and unless you have a few $100,000 saved that I don't know about, I imagine retaining a good attorney is going to be challenging. If you're watching this and you're as shocked as they were, do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next proved that sometimes justice comes swiftly when you have the truth on your side." "Mom, please." David's voice again, and now he sounded less angry and more frightened. "Don't do this. We can work this out. We can talk." "You had 3 years to talk to me like I mattered, David. 3 years to treat me with respect. Instead, you treated me like an ATM and then like an embarrassment. I'm done talking." I hung up. By Monday morning, Frances had filed all the necessary paperwork. The property transfers were contested and under legal review. The investment accounts remained frozen. David and Jennifer's access to their money was completely cut off. They hired an attorney. They must have scraped together funds somehow, maybe borrowed from Jennifer's parents. Their lawyer sent Frances a strongly worded letter claiming the transfers were legal and binding, threatening to countersue for harassment and emotional distress. Frances responded with a 16-page document detailing every email, every promise, every instance of David and Jennifer using my assets contrary to our agreement. She included testimony I'd given about the birthday party incident, along with statements from 2 guests who'd witnessed Jennifer's announcement and were willing to testify that it demonstrated a pattern of financial exploitation. The key evidence was David's own emails. "You'll have complete access to everything, Mom. Nothing will change. We're just protecting you." Every promise documented in writing. Every promise broken. Their attorney reviewed Frances's response and, according to Frances, called her privately to say, "They don't have a case. If this goes to court, they'll lose and probably face additional penalties for elder financial abuse. I'd advise them to negotiate a settlement." But David and Jennifer didn't want to negotiate. They wanted to fight. So we went to court. The hearing was in late spring, 3 months after David's birthday party. I sat beside Frances at the plaintiff's table, wearing a gray suit Frank had always said made me look distinguished. Across the aisle, David and Jennifer sat with their attorney, both of them refusing to look at me. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Chen. She reviewed the evidence with a thoroughness that made me grateful for Frances's meticulous documentation. She read David's emails aloud in court, then looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Morrison, you wrote to your mother, and I quote, 'You'll have complete access to everything. Nothing will change.' Did you write that?" "Yes, Your Honor," David said quietly. "And did your mother have complete access to the Montana property after you placed it on a rental site?" "We were generating income for the family." "Answer the question, please. Did she have access?" David's jaw tightened. "No, Your Honor." "Did you consult her before using funds from the investment accounts to purchase a house?" "The money was legally—" "Did you consult her?" "No." Judge Chen looked down at the papers before her, then back up at David and Jennifer. "I'm troubled by what I'm seeing here. This appears to be a textbook case of financial exploitation of an elderly parent. You induced Mrs. Morrison to transfer substantial assets by making explicit promises about her continued access and control. You then systematically violated every one of those promises while using her assets to enrich yourselves. The incident at your birthday party, where your wife publicly referred to your mother as Charity, demonstrates clear intent to diminish and control her. Jennifer started to speak, but her attorney put a hand on her arm. I'm reversing all property transfers, Judge Chen continued. The house deeds, the vehicle titles, the investment accounts, all of it reverts to Mrs. Morrison's sole ownership, effective immediately. Additionally, Mr. and Mrs. Morrison will reimburse Mrs. Morrison for the fair market rental value of her Montana property for the period it was rented without her consent, plus any profits they derived from the investment accounts. You have 30 days to vacate the property you purchased with her funds or pay her fair market value for her share. Mrs. Morrison, is there anything else you'd like to add? I looked at David. He was staring at the table, his face pale. No, Your Honor, I said. I think that covers everything. Judge Chen signed the order. Just like that, it was over. David and Jennifer had to move out of their dream house. They couldn't afford to buy me out, so it went on the market. After selling costs and paying me back my portion, they walked away with almost nothing. The BMW got repossessed when they couldn't make the payments. They had to move into a modest rental house. My cabin was returned to me, along with $18,000 in rental income they'd collected. My investment accounts were unfrozen and back in my name only. My house was mine again, with no one else's name on the deed. Everything I'd given away, I got back.